Hello and welcome to the Astrology and Spirituality Show for our quarterly summer special with Patrick Arundell and myself, Alyssa. It's lovely to be here with you today.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. Now, of course, this event coincides with the summer solstice, but that's just in the Northern Hemisphere. So down south it's the winter solstice and it's the shortest day, not the longest. But astrology, or Western tropical astrology, is predicated on a Mediterranean construct. There are lots of different types of astrological systems, and I'm not saying that this is the only one that people can use, it's just the one that I use. So what did we have at that moment when the solstice occurred? What were the planets telling us? Well, of course, the most important part of it is the sun returns to the sign of Cancer, which in terms of the overall zodiac is the sleep point. It's the point of reflection. We're thinking about our sense of security, physical and emotional, and just taking a little bit of a pause from the breathless Gemini phase that we've gone through, which is very busy and helter-skelter. So anything to do with where we live, how we live there, our immediate environment, our family situations are all going to come sharply into focus in the next 4 weeks. But the chart for the quarterly quadrant actually goes on for 13 weeks through to the autumnal equinox. So just have a quick look at that chart. So as I mentioned, the sun moving into Cancer, and the big takeout is the sun is in an odd angle with Pluto, which of course has now inversed into the sign of Capricorn. So it's known as a quincunx. So balancing that desire for comfort and security needs to toggle with how we connect to others, because it's so close to the sign of Aquarius, just a few minutes apart. That energy is still going to be prevalent. We also have a big impact with the nodal axis to Pluto as well. So the nodes, the North Node, very much about our collective consciousness, and it's inching towards moving into Aries on the 17th of July, the true North Node. But also the T-square with Pluto suggests that power issues are going to be prevailing, but particularly around finance and the cost of living. So I feel that Pluto is very much about things being revealed. So we are seeing more and more dramatic revelations with people who've had power and not necessarily used it in the right ways. We're seeing more and more stuff come into the open, so that's interesting. But I think we are going through a big reset in terms of becoming much more conscious of the, not just the cost in terms of the money, but the cost of the planet in terms of resources. And obviously everything has become a lot tougher since that total lunar eclipse of the 8th of November in Taurus, which occurred last year. So that was a big stepping point to where we are now. So in this event we also have Saturn squaring with Mercury and Neptune squaring with the Sun, both quite challenging influences. So I think communication for us all, although the Sun in Cancer is asking us to be more mindful of the emotional side of things, there can be some issues to do with past energies, the more culminated energies of Pisces, where Saturn is, and Neptune, which is a bit distorting potentially, they're applying to the more communicational energies of Mercury and the Sun just into the sign of Cancer. So we also have that cluster of energy in Leo, which is really exciting, and just suggests that even if we are going through some kind of reset and we are more mindful, the cost of living, being more careful with our finances and resources, we can still connect to people, but we're probably going to need to use more creativity in order to do that. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a flavour. Now, the tarot card, what tarot card are we going to get for this quarter?
Well, let's have a little look. We're going to use the Renaissance Tarot deck for this quarter. Last quarter we had the Six of Cups, which was very much about nostalgia. So it'll be interesting to see what comes up for us for this new quarter. Ooh. We have the Two of Swords.
Wow.
Very often when people see any kind of swords card, they're sort of like, oh no. But swords just represents our logic. It's very airy, and the Two of Swords is about decision making, and very often with this card, if we make decision A, it kind of stops us from going for decision B, or vice versa. So some of the decisions that we have to be making in this next quarter are going to shape how we live our lives moving forward. So although this is a pip card, which generally represents everyday choices, these can have a big impact. One of these things could be a new fitness regime. That in the next year could have a huge impact on how we are overall, but it's just smaller steps to begin with. So
can we feel conflicted with the Two of Swords, that pulled in two different directions?
That's so spot on that you say that, because in some tarot decks there is a picture of a lady who is blindfolded and she's holding these two swords, and it can indicate that we do have indecision going on, that we don't know which choice to make. This card really urges us to make a choice. Sometimes not making a choice can be a good thing, and that can be a decision in itself. But when the Two of Swords comes up, it's saying, no, we kind of need to make a firm choice on how we're moving forwards, you know, and not sort of let procrastination steal our power anymore with this card.
Oh, I think you've explained that brilliantly. Thank you. Now, one of the big news stories that's going on at the moment is about Titan, this craft, this submersible craft that had gone down to explore near to the Titanic wreck. And at the time of filming this, there is 4 or 5 people in that craft, which is not designed to hold people for any more than a few hours. And it seems to have really caught the media's imagination, you know, and I think we probably all visualise what it would be like in there, where it's so cramped.
Oh, very claustrophobic.
Because, you know, I'm quite a claustrophobic person anyway, so just the thought of being in that, oh, blimey, that's really challenging.
Very.
So it's really caught people's imagination. But other people are saying, is it right that all these resources are being piled in to save these people when, you know, we have had some very serious disasters very recently in the Mediterranean, with refugees on overladen craft, and that in itself has caused a lot of controversy. So it's interesting, you know, where the attention goes. And for me, I was thinking about this before this, and I was thinking, well, it probably is because we can all readily imagine being in that craft, and the Titanic seems to be a story that really captures people's imagination. Yeah. But, you know, maybe one of the biggest challenges in life for all of us is to try and always put ourselves in other people's shoes, even though their situation may be completely different from ours. So we can put ourselves in that Titan craft very easily because we, you know, it's very relatable because of the backstory of the Titanic. But do we all think quite so much about when people drown in hundreds, you know? And obviously a lot of people are very sensitive to migration and feel very threatened by it, which is understandable in some ways. And so, yeah, so I just wanted to tease out.
I think that's a really good point. And also, you know, if we're thinking about the craft that has gone missing, you know, that was costing over £4 million to do that trip in the first place. And so it's not saying that somebody's life is more important than another person's life, but it is just to say, let's maybe shine the attention on the people that are also less fortunate and going through some horrific the things at sea as well.
Yeah.
Without maybe the prejudice lens on it.
Yeah, spot on. And just in terms of the astrology, I was reading on Facebook today. I belong to the Mundane Astrologers group on there, which mundane astrology is very much about events, often about countries. So it seems to me that the craft was launched on the 18th. So in terms of the astrology, the sun was late in Gemini, close to the moon, and was in a square with Neptune. Now Neptune is obviously the planet that governs the sea. It's located in Pisces, obviously Pisces, the two fish, but also Mercury, which rules transport in some ways, along with Jupiter. Usually short trips, located in its home sign of Gemini. Its other home sign of Virgo, very much about precision and practicality. But that Mercury position was squared by Saturn, also in Pisces. So that's not great astrology, to be honest, because if you think about it from the overall zodiac, 3 is the journey, and 12 is the confusion, potentially, the hidden risks, the sea side of things, and also Saturn applying to Mercury is the limitation on communication, which seems to have been a massive problem with this situation. So it doesn't look, very hopeful for them, but obviously we really hope that, some kind of miracle does come from that. Yeah. Now, the word of the quarter, we were looking for the cookie jar, so we're going to be really honest, we couldn't find it.
The cookie jar has gone AWOL.
Yeah, so missing in the house somewhere. So we just looked at each other and I just said patience.
And I said, wow.
Where'd you get that from?
And I thought that was a fantastic word, because I think a lot of us, that is something that we have to work on. Now, some other people, patience comes a lot easier, and maybe you have the patience of a saint, but for me personally, patience is something that I have to work on a lot. And I think it's Patrick will attest to that, and I think that there is something really beautiful when we can really surrender to that patience and not have to feel that we have to control every action, or that we have to push, to have that more kind of receptive energy. Patience is for me.
Yeah, just come off that edge of intense frustration and just let it go. I think that's a brilliant piece of advice. I'm not a great one for quotes, but there is one I do know that's linked to this subject. There was a French philosopher called Jean de La Fontaine, and one of his was patience and the passage of time do more than strength and fury. So in other words, things, if we take a breath, things usually find some kind of way to work out. But obviously we do react. We're all triggered because things aren't necessarily going at the pace we want. People aren't being very responsive in the way that we need. Mm-hmm. And that creates an instant sort of rush of impatience. So yeah, interesting. So for the next 13 weeks, let's see if you and I can summon some.
Yeah, and anytime we falter, we will remember this video and so watch it.
Definitely not coming from a position of being sorted on that one.
No, definitely not.
So another thing that's come up for us, we've had a few bits and pieces of communication going on with different professional people, and like one person asked us why we weren't using their services this time round, and a listener had actually written to them in February after they'd written to us saying what's happening with this situation, when we'd already briefed them of that in the September. So there was a breakdown in communication within that particular organisation. And so anyway, the boss wrote to us and said, well, I really hope that I haven't, or we haven't offended you, which we weren't really seeing it in those terms. They didn't reply to Elisa's reply in February. So there was no reply to their query. So we wrote back last week and just said, this is not a personal issue, that we did write in February when your colleague reached out to us and we didn't get a reply. So could you please give us your take on the situation? Guess what? We haven't had a reply.
Still no reply.
So we both feel that there will be situations in life that do come to an end, sometimes not ones that we necessarily want. So, for example, someone else can decide that they're moving on from us. There's not a lot we can do about that. But we can try to be as dignified as possible about the cutting point, the separating point. We don't necessarily have to justify ourselves or explain everything, but we can very politely let someone know and acknowledge the role that they may have played in our situation, because it's not a very pleasant process to go through, but there is a decency in that. But there seems to be this new concept, which Alyssa's taught me a lot about in the 6 years we've been together. It's really about ghosting. And I think that concept has come into the vocabulary of many of us in recent times a huge amount. So it seems to me, am I right in saying that ghosting is when someone creates a reality of a situation which isn't necessarily based on facts, it's more based on the way they're trying to shape perceptions?
Yeah, I think it's twofold really. I think what also going back to the vocabulary, I think what's happening is we're now putting words to things that we've all kind of experienced, and now we can just say, oh, that's what it was. And I know that words like gaslighting and narcissists get thrown about maybe a bit too much, but what it helps us to do is identify that kind of feeling and emotion. And so ghosting could be, say you go on a date and you feel it's gone really well, and you text them to let you know you're back home, had a nice time, and then they don't reply. Or it could be even worse in a way, where you're having a relationship that's maybe been going on for a few months, and then they just don't reply or cut you out completely.
Heard from a few people that recently.
And it's just
devastating.
So mean. And I don't really understand the logic behind why one person would do that to another person. I think in some ways it could be a fear of confrontation, and the person doing the ghosting is actually not a very secure person, so it feels like they have the power, but actually they're the ones with a lot of work to do if you're just going to cut somebody out. But I think that we all need to be conscious that things can change. I was thinking about this, like when you're in school and you're very young, your friendship groups, well, for me particularly, changed on a weekly basis. I was best friends with Sarah, then I'm best friends with Sam, then Lucy, or whoever. And I think that's very normal, and we can change friendship groups throughout our lives, but it's when things end abruptly, or there's no conclusion, or it doesn't feel like a natural change, it can be really upsetting and really jarring.
Yeah, I've really been thinking about this, and I think that one of the things that digital communication does is it means we don't have to physically encounter somebody in order to end the relationship. So if you go back to olden times, obviously people were clustered in smaller communities where they would encounter the person that they found it difficult to be around. We all have people whose energy doesn't mesh with ours as much as we'd like. It's not anyone's fault, it's just the way it is. But in a smaller community you encounter people, so you encounter the reality of that. Whereas the digital community, it seems to me that it's introduced a ruthlessness to the way people are with one another. And it could be about dating, as Alyssa said, it could be about professional services, it could be about anything. It's actually hard, I think you would agree, to speak to anybody, even if it's down to your insurance premium, because the companies don't want to pay anyone to answer your phone call, because that increases their cost. So they don't really care about the human connection, so they want you to do it all digitally online, which is a very detached and cold and not a very pleasant environment for us all to exist in. And it's fine if you're lucky enough to have a relationship or close family or good neighbours, but if you're somebody who lives on your own, the sense of isolation that's creating is a profound worry, I think, for personkind.
And this is why the word that we pulled up for this quarter of patience isn't saying that, oh, this is easy, because if you're in that situation, patience is not easy when these things or very annoying in the times that we live in, particularly like you say, if you're somebody, you know, who's dealing with these things on your own, and then you've got people saying to you, well, you need to practice patience. You know, that can be, we
people
would never
projecting platitudes
that
is the worst thing
the worst.
possible.
So we can all just try and do a bit better at where we are at. We're all going to fail at that at times, and that's okay as well.
Yeah. I'd just like to briefly, thank you so much, Alyssa. I'd just like to briefly say that what the solstice did bring in is Cardinal quadrant 2. So Western tropical astrology is predicated on 4 13-week quadrants. The reason they're called cardinal is the first one, Aries, at the vernal equinox, is a cardinal sign, which is about action and leadership. Cancer has this reputation of being chained to the kitchen sink and being very nurturing. No, Cancer is a very powerful sign, and it's very much about providing that fabric of security, but it's a leadership sign for sure. 13 weeks. Then we come around to Libra, we start that process of relating, cardinal sign, and the fourth one is on the winter solstice, which is Capricorn, which is the fourth cardinal quadrant, and that's very much about goals and ambitions, and it's the culmination point. It's the way that we're linking to the wider world, trying to seek recognition for our hard work and talents, and it's more to do with property and more established parts of our existence. So these 4 cardinal quadrants are trigger points for action for the following 13 weeks. So that's why the sun moving into Cancer is incredibly important, but we do need to look beyond that to see when that event exactly occurred, what was the other interrelation between the other influences. I mean, there was a brilliant one between Mercury and Mars, very much to do with passionate communication, but it just so happened that Mars was also in a very abrasive right angle with Uranus, which can see us speak out in a very quick and abrupt way. Mars obviously not the most patient planet, in the sign of Leo, very proud. Uranus is location in Taurus, very much about resources. So that could see us feeling very frustrated if we can't live our lives in quite the way we had before financially, and it could see us doing something compulsive. But that could be good if we think, oh look, I've just got to go out for a night because this is all hard going, I need a bit of escapism. That can trigger us to do something that could end up being quite exciting, but it may mean in a romantic or financial context that impatience could be actually intensified. So the events of the cardinal quadrant linked to the solstice is hugely important in Western tropical astrology, which is based on the seasons, and it's not based on the precession of the equinoxes. So that's why, you know, a lot of the detractors of astrology would say, well, you know, the constellations have all shifted because the Earth's axis is tilted, so it's all wrong, it's 25 degrees out. Well, that is another form of astrology called sidereal astrology, which takes into account that. That doesn't mean sidereal astrology is wrong and Western tropical astrology is right. They're just different systems, and they both still use the same planets and the same players within the overall story.
But I will just say, if you would like to check out Patrick's Summer Solstice Deep Dive video,
oh, right,
I will leave that in the description box beneath this video. He's also done a Summer Stars special, which I found really fascinating, so I'll leave that link below as well.
Yeah, we did that a little bit differently because I did a screenshot of each of the zodiac signs based on assuming, in like a whole sign astrology approach, that the sun is at 0 degrees of that sign. So it means all the planets move round, and if you're growing your interest in astrology, hopefully that will make it more relatable. And Elisa has interspaced those into the video, and a bit of fun, calling them the stars. That's not the technical term we should use, because stars are fixed stars, for example like Polaris, which coincided with that new moon. Polaris is obviously linked to nuclear warfare through submarines. Interesting, that, isn't it? And but we also have within the sign of Cancer, around about the 6th and 7th of July, we have one of the most gorgeous fixed stars of all, which is Sirius. So a little bit of journalistic license calling it summer stars, but it is totally applicable if you are down south as well and you're in your winter. I try to make it as inclusive as possible. Now, if you would like a one-to-one with Alyssa, she is a qualified life coach, has a lot of knowledge about astrology, but her main modalities are tarot and oracle cards. Yeah. But also, you don't claim to be a psychic, but I think that you have very, very strong instincts.
Yes.
And
it would be an honour to work with you if you'd like to work with me. So if that's the case, I'll leave my details in the description box beneath this video.
Brilliant. And if you'd like to have a chat with me, please see my details below, and you can check out both of our testimonials too. Now, if you've really got an emerging interest in astrology and you want to understand a lot more about what makes you tick, you can take advantage of our special offer of 30% off for your life roadmap report, which will give you a much greater understanding of your patterns that have gone on all through your life, but also within that you can get your 12-month personal forecast. These are totally unique to you. Now, if you don't know your time, we have developed a new package, the solar package, which doesn't use an ascendant, and it's really exciting, and a lot of people have brought this and are really enjoying it. So please see the details below for more. So we're sat in the garden.
You could probably hear the crows. I think they were getting a little bit hungry.
Yeah, we keep filling up the fat boys, and the crows are just hooligans.
They really are.
We mentioned before, the crow twins, although there's a whole mob of them. And the pigeons are incredibly polite. After you, Claude. After you, Claude. And how they're that big, I never know, because they're always saying after you.
No, they just get the crumbs. But
yeah.
And also, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to our Patreons who have supported us for a long time.
We haven't been as communicative as we would like. We've been doing a lot of work to where we've been living, and it's looking like we're going to move, but we haven't really wanted to say too much about that, because obviously the way property sales are transacted in England and Wales is a very flaky system, and unless you've actually got the key in your hand, it's not done. So we're not going to say too much about that, but we've done a lot of preparation over the last couple of years, and obviously we've been living in West Wales, and we will still be living in West Wales, but an update will come, but thank you to our patrons for bearing with us through. We haven't been as interactive as we would like. So thank you so much for joining us. Wishing you all the best for the next 13 weeks. What a time it is for the world. It really is a momentous time. All these secrets spilling into the open. We're seeing big challenges going on all over the place in terms of the geopolitics, if you like. The financial system is under a lot of pressure, and we're all needing to kind of relearn and readjust as we go along, which doesn't make it easy. And I think the fact that Neptune was squaring to the Sun when this event occurs does point towards some of the disorientation we may be feeling. But hope comes from our connections to one another, from a respectfulness that we all have a different experience, and that's fine, and to try to keep those lines of communication open, or if we want to close them, just be upfront about it and explain, even if we don't necessarily want to justify it, why that is. So, from the
A team, it is goodbye from him.
And it's goodbye from her. Goodbye.